everyone. Welcome to 12 Step Crashers, episode number 11, I think. Not sure.
9.
I'm happy to be here tonight with my co host Eric and Crystal Ray, our guest tonight, that we're really excited to have on the show. We're going to be talking about recovery from yet another angle. And yeah, without further ado, how are you doing tonight, Crystal?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. What about you, Eric? How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, actually. I actually had a good day at work today, which was strange. So I'll just leave it at that and won't question it.
Maybe you just have a positive mindset. Maybe that's the only thing that changed today.
No, I think it's apathy. But anyways, it works.
Apathy works for you. I'm not going to question that. What about you, Crystal? How was the day?
It was pretty good. I've had a pretty busy week, and I actually had a podcast yesterday, and I was reviewing some of that content before I came on here, and just feel really good about how it went. And I had the opportunity to be on the Hard Knocks Talks podcast recently also, and that was really just awesome. So I just really appreciate you being interested in sharing my story.
Of course. Well, I guess there's a reason why every podcast have you recently is because you have a very inspiring story to tell about recovery is possible, and we do recover. But instead of me filling the air, I'm going to turn the mic to you and let you talk about your recovery to us.
All right. Well, I often say I'm your gem of the day, Crystal Ray, and I have been in active recovery for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years on Tuesday. And I don't like to count my chickens before they hatch, but I don't plan on using. And I have some pretty big goals and lots of things going on in my life that really help to keep me sober, and connection to community is a big thing. It's my recovery over the last 2 years has really been a journey. So to back up a little bit, I'm a flammable liquid burn survivor, and I survived a traumatic burn injury after a mental health crisis and a drug relapse. And so I had been kind of in and out of treatment, just kind of going through the motions before my burn injury. I relapsed really hard, really took it really hard, and then was triggered by somebody who abused me as a child, and snapped. And on that day, I was really, all these thoughts came flooding in about, my shame around my relapse. How was I going to talk to my family about it? And I was already struggling with keeping healthy boundaries with people that made me uncomfortable in my life. This abuser that came and triggered me the day that I tried to end my life. He had sexually abused me as a child, and then I relapsed and had been using drugs with him. And so he was like the last person I wanted to see that day. He knocked on my window. I came flying out the camper that I was staying in and poured gas over myself and lit myself on fire in front of him. Just having all these thoughts flooding in my head about, how am I going to explain this to my children? How am I going to explain this to my family? How is anything ever going to get better? I had already been going through intense outpatient treatment and only kind of just going through the motions just because I knew I had to do that. I wasn't really, in it for the long haul, I don't think, at that point. I was just doing it because I wanted to see my kids. I wanted to be part of their life. And then, I was around this abuser, and I wanted to numb my feelings and numb the situation. I took the easy way out by relapsing and just numbing it, and that's what we do. And I was kind of beating myself up about it already in coming down in my camper before he knocked on the window, and then I was just instantly pissed. I didn't think that anything ever was going to change, and that's I was in a very dark place where I thought that was going to be the most painless way out of my situation, and instead of facing that I had relapsed and facing my family.
Speaks a lot about the level of pain you were in.
Right.
You would know that it's going to be painful, but it's still going to be less painful that the state
in what
you
I'm
were in.
going through. Yeah,
It's almost another level of escape to the extreme.
exactly. And then so that happened, and I was life flighted. We didn't have any running water. This was in remote Alaska, and I had like, this is like a camper that I had been sleeping in, that really nobody should be calling a home. And my drug of choice was at that point methamphetamine and heroin. And I had some dirty laundry that I had set outside in a tote, and it had rained on the laundry, and that was the only water that we had at the time. And he put me out with that water and smothered me out and took me to my uncle's house after that, and they called EMS, had me life flighted to Seattle from Alaska, and I spent 5.5 months in the ICU on even more heavy medication. And once I was coherent enough to walk and dress myself and really could bathe myself, I told the doctors I wanted out of the hospital, which was about a year earlier than what they had wanted me to leave. And I really didn't have the capacity to understand the gravity of my injury still, because I was still on so many medications. And I was just like, no, you said I could go as soon as I could wipe my own ass and dress myself, and I can do that, so I'm out of here. And I had seen in my past drug use lots of friends go in and out of the hospital with endocarditis from using, and like really be on their deathbed and like leave the hospital to go use. And I never understood that until I was in that situation. And so I was already angry when I woke up in the hospital, combative the whole time I was there, and I really just didn't accept that I would tell everybody that they wasted the resources to save my life. They shouldn't have done it. Like, why would you do that? Obviously, I didn't want to be here. And it was really hard for my family to hear all of that, see all that. They didn't want to believe that I would do that to myself. Initially, I was under an assumed name while they investigated my fire, because they weren't sure, because of the past abuse, if he did it to me or if I did it to myself. And so, like, I had to be honest in the hospital with that, and it was really difficult, but I was in so much pain myself. I was just, raw honesty was the most I could hurt anybody with, and I was just wanted them to hurt as much as I was. And so my words were really hurtful for a long time.
Crystal, you mentioned that happened in remote Alaska. Are you from there, or what's the reason you were up there?
I'm Alaska Native from there.
Okay.
And I was raised there.
Okay, so all of your family history is around the place that where the tragedy happened.
Occurred, yeah.
So I have a question. So is it easily available, ready, easy to find your drug of choice in Alaska? Because it's kind of remote. It would
absolutely
seem. It is. It's a problem.
It's interesting.
It's really, like, especially because I grew up there, and when I was raised there, my mother and her one of her boyfriends were known drug dealers in the area when I was growing up. So there's a lot of different drug connections that I have because I grew up there.
I see.
Yeah, and I guess addictions thrive in isolation, so every remote location have their own supply for drugs, understandably. But it's interesting because it might be even easier to find heroin there than it is in large city in the States, because there's only fentanyl now available. I mean, if you're looking for said thing, you won't get it. But that's beside the point. I kind of feel your recovery is, of course, drug use recovery, but on threefold, right? Survivor of burn and also abuse in your young age. So those are three things that you're recovering from at the same time. So I guess, and you voice it well when you talk about your story in the very beginning, like those three things are mentioned, and this is your actual journey. I want to say that it's probably 3 times harder than a typical recovery. Not that it's calculated this way, but you have multiple challenge to overcome, multiple things to accept at once.
Absolutely.
That needs a lot of courage.
Thank you.
I mean, I would be proud to be able to voice it in your position.
I appreciate that. It's taken a lot of self-reflection to like really I'm writing about it, so it kind of helps a little bit too to get it out. And I do engage with peer support groups within the burn community with a lot of trauma survivors. There's other burn survivors who have done this to themselves. There's other burn survivors who their spouse has done this to them. And so they can relate to the abuse and all of that stuff too. And so having that support system to just really devocalize the thoughts, feelings, and all of the things that go into it has been really helpful.
In the same way that community for addiction is really important to connect with people that have similar stories and feel understood. In the burn community, I guess you get the same type of connection and mutual understanding on the journey you are on. And it's a good thing that those community exists. I'm going to talk only for myself, but in recovery circle, I definitely had my life saved a couple of times because alone I would have been able to go through the pain I was in.
Right. And I also, because of my injury, I can't really be in the sun or in the weather, and like I'm pretty isolated anyway. And going into like public meetings was really hard for me too, because for one, I'm like always hyper vigilant because I'm afraid somebody's going to touch me or like bump me or and then just whenever I walk into the grocery store, a new place, I stop traffic. People are looking and they're trying not to look. And so it's like a whole nother level of like, I got to put some armor on before I walk out the door. And I am also susceptible to like getting sick easier. And so I have to think about all of that stuff going into like meetings. And so having the burn community and virtual meetings was really, really helpful in my early like burn recovery. And then I was like, okay, even though I'm not doing drugs, I feel like I'm left out of the recovery community because I like didn't go to treatment. I came here on a plane. I cold turkeyed in this apartment and I just changed my life. And I felt like, because my family has all struggled with substance abuse and stuff, and they have told me, oh, you're not really sober because you don't have a sponsor. And I actually do have a sponsor, but like, because I don't go to meetings outside my house every day and interact with people, they're like, we don't count that because I had to go, like, my siblings have had to go to like intense inpatient treatment that was court ordered and like go through all the, the steps for the legal system to deem themselves recovered or rehabilitated or whatever like they had those expectations for their recovery, but because I didn't have them for mine doesn't count.
That's a really good point because I kind of feel it is true from 12-step groups, but it's true of pretty much any recovery path. A lot of people tend to feel like the only way is the way that they took, and that's simply not true. There's multiple ways to recovery, and not a single person has the same journey as the next person. And it's sad that some people will kind of exclude you or ostracize you even because you didn't go to treatment. For me, that's nonsense.
Right. And I have learned more by being involved with recovery communities online and there's multiple paths to recovery and every one is valid as long as you're like on that journey of staying sober and doing what's right for you, even if it's medication assisted treatment, whatever that looks like for you. Like if you are like, I really have studied like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and talked about my recovery in that fashion too. Is like I was continuing to use because I didn't have a safe environment, and so I was trying to numb myself from that environment. And like you have to, like some people can't even have the capacity to put themselves in a safe environment if they are dope sick. So if you need medication assisted treatment, like go for it to get it's a means to an end of living life on the streets and putting a needle in your arm and just being hopeless.
When you left the hospital, you were still on opiates that they gave you, right?
Right.
So you were not sober at that time.
Nope.
And you said you took a plane. Did you fly back to Alaska?
No. So my mom lives in Montana, and she was traveling back and forth from Montana to Seattle to visit me often. And I went home from the hospital to her house, and she has struggled with her own substance use for most of my life, and still kind of does. And when I was in the hospital, and right after I got out of the hospital, she definitely was using, and they had already started to wean me off of I was taking, at my highest point in the hospital, I was taking Dilaudid 8 times a day. And then they had weaned me down to 5 times a day. And I was still in so much pain. I was like, the 5 times a day is not relieving the pain. And I was like looking for other solutions. And so I was using street drugs at home and using them with my mom. And like, she had a lot of friends that would come over, and I would like tell them if they wanted to be around me, they had to get me high. You're not gonna sit here and look at my mutilated face if I'm not high. Like, I don't want to deal with you. You don't want to look at me. Let's get high. And then we'll just ignore it. And so that was my way to socialize and cope after my burn injury also. And because I started using illicit drugs, I got cut off the Dilaudid. And so then I was 80% burned, dope sick from being cut off all of these medications that I was already being prescribed. And now I've had illicit drugs in my system too, and I'm just a mess.
So just to get that straight, like, you're in a system where health is private, so you pay for it, and you are a victim of a burn injury. You struggle with addiction, and because you struggle with addiction, you are cut off the medication that you need for your burn injury, and you're paying for all this. This is above insane.
Millions of dollars. I haven't even calculated all the millions of dollars that went into my care, but it's over like $3 million.
And still not able to receive proper care because you have a substance use disorder. But how did you get yourself out of that? Did you use MAT, or you were not even eligible because you were using street drugs? Or
so they tried to put me on MAT, and I struggled with that for a while. I didn't really like the way the Suboxone made me super sick, and it just so I just started using street drugs. I was like, that's not working for me. I'm just gonna relieve it the way I know how. And I would surround myself with people that would allow me to relieve my pain any way I wanted to. And eventually my mom and I were not getting along. I was still mentally unstable, still using a lot of drugs, and I flew back to Alaska. Still burned, homeless, like, have no idea where I was going to stay, but went back, and like, still couch surfing now when I'm there, and trying to get on my feet, but still just going through the cycle of booze. It's not working out where I'm living because I'm combative, or like just victim mindset and being abusive with my mouth. And so I'd have to leave, or I'd be too drunk. And like, yeah, after my injury, I was drinking like half a gallon every other day, or sometimes every day, in addition to using illicit street drugs. And so I struggled with my substance use for 3 years after my burn injury, and was couch surfing and like in and out of families' homes, and finally kind of took over one of my uncle's houses that a bunch of his friends were in and out of. It was my aunt's house that she went to, like a nursing home. And they kind of just took it over after she went to the nursing home, bring in like donation bins to the house to like go through. And it was just full of a bunch of garbage and, like a flop house. And so I kicked everybody out of there because my aunt wasn't there. And my uncle has a junkyard that was miles away. And he almost was relieved that I was there. And I just like kicked him out. But I'm still using. He knew I was using. And it was just kind of a place that I could stay and do what I wanted, as long as I took care of his house or whatever. But if I left the house, he had a lot of people that would go to the junkyard to get drugs or use drugs or whatever. If they didn't find him at the junkyard, they would come to the house. And if somebody didn't answer the door, they'd climb in the windows. And if I wasn't there, they'd climb in the windows, take the stuff out of the fridge, take the soap out of the laundry room and the bathroom. Yeah.
It's very low boundaries, like, or inexistent boundaries
Right.
whatsoever.
I was just going to
And
say,
looking back on,
go ahead, Dev. No, you go ahead.
just one quick question. So you mentioned you left the hospital a year before what the doctors had in mind. Looking at that 3-year journey that followed, is that something you would make a different decision if you look back at it, or it wouldn't necessarily happen?
I try not to entertain the thoughts of what I would do if I had it to do over, because I can't. But I do tell people now, follow your doctor's orders. They are so much more experienced with a burn injury of that size than you are, and they have seen it. Like, even if you just don't listen to the doctors. I would have stayed.
Yeah.
Thanks for reframing, because that was kind of the question I wanted to ask, and that was a bit sloppy. So thank you. Yes, we cannot change the past.
No.
I gotta accept it.
I was curious. Well, I'm curious. I think I'm just making a statement here. I just find it incredible that you, just looking at your cycle and the way you described it, you have this trauma that you're carrying, and you're in an environment where a lot of people use, and you said it was prevalent in your family. So you're in the cycle and you're in the environment, and you have this burn incident that happens, and then you go into this place, but the system basically just throws you out because they know that you're dealing with your addiction, which is why you're in the hospital, in essence, besides the trauma, but then the addiction, which led to the event, and yet they wash their hands of you. I mean, the system is mind-boggling, and it's self-perpetuating. I can't believe it. It's an incredible. You make an incredible statement just by being present on this podcast today, because I'm not sure many people could have gone through that and made it this far.
Thank you. There's not a whole lot, and I didn't realize. I felt like I was the only one when I was going through it, and I really was like, how could you guys have no compassion? Like, the first time I had illicit drugs in my system, they're like, Crystal, we can tell, we had to send your urine out to see if the Dilaudid was in there, but we could tell you already have heroin and methamphetamine in there, and we will not be filling your prescription again. We are going to give you some Phenergan for nausea, and you're going to have a rough week. I was in the hospital for 5.5 months, and I had been out of the hospital for 2 months when they kicked me off of my medication. So
Did it not offer to go back to the hospital? Was that an option given to you? Did it not offer to go back to the hospital to be back in ICU?
No, they never offered that. But I don't think that I would have taken it either.
Wow,
I was I was still so angry that I was alive still. I didn't want them to spend any more money trying to save me, because I did not feel worthy of what they were doing already.
Well, you know what? Okay, that's pretty. Since you went there, how did that mindset change?
It took a long time, but looking in the mirror daily, I used to stare in the mirror and look at like everything that had changed, and then I started to see my dimples in the mirror, and I was like, oh, I can see myself. I can see her in there. And so I just started loving on myself in the mirror and telling myself, if you can't love this appearance, nobody else will. And for the first 2 years of my burn injury, also, my eyes were stitched mostly closed. And I had left the hospital like this, and they couldn't release them for at least a year after my fire. But it took 2 years for them to be able to cut them open, and actually, so I could blink again and look as beautiful as they are. But so I struggled with accepting my appearance for at least 2 years, because I knew it was going to change after my eyes were open. I knew it was going to look even like I was going to look crazy again. And so I struggled to accept it. And yeah, just a lot of self-reflection and learning and loving about my injury, like learning about how much care went into it, how like I didn't know for a long time that the skin that saved my life came from cadavers. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, like they saved my life in an instant, and they had to use like by any means necessary, and they really did. And so then I was like, why would you do that? But then I started thinking, well, why me? I didn't share this with you, but as soon as I lit the lighter, I heard my higher power say, Crystal, you don't get to choose. You're going to be in a lot more pain now. And that's the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital. And so I knew, even though I was angry that they saved my life, like I knew not to do that again. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people after they're burned, even accidentally, they're suicidal because of their appearance. And I wasn't necessarily suicidal, but I was angry that like I have a failure on a whole nother level. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but I just really had to get into a routine of loving on myself. And I started making my bed and doing my stretches and praying about it every day and talking to my higher power, just like, help me utilize my time, my energy, and my money in the best way possible. And that was for a long time, like, how do I utilize my time, my energy, and my money best? And because I'm permanently disabled now. 80% of my body is burned, everything but my feet and my groin. I had to relearn how to talk, walk, write, eat, shower. And so it's been a lot in the last 5 years. That happened five years ago in August. And in October 29th, 2022, when I was calling my significant other that I live with here now. He lived here already. He's from Alaska also and familiar with all the people that I was dealing with. And he offered to send me a ticket. He said, if I send you a ticket, will you get on the plane? And I was like, yeah, I'll come visit. He's like, no, not to visit, like to come here and just like start over, take care of yourself, get your shit together. And I like threw around the idea for a while, and then I think somebody broke into my house and stole my laptop, and I was like, I've just had it. I'm like, if you buy the ticket, I'll get on the plane. Like, you might have to buy me clothes when I get there, because I'm only gonna bring what I need to bring. And he bought me a ticket, and I got on the plane on October 29th and manifested a new life on that flight. Didn't know what I was coming to, had never been to Oklahoma before, and moved to Oklahoma. When I got here, I cold turkey in this apartment. He works every day. He's a roofer, and he told me when I first got here and was in the fetal position in his bed, he left me a stack of money on his entertainment center, and he said, this is for you, for whatever you need to do. Whatever you need to, if you need to go get something, go get it. Here you go. But you can do whatever you want with that money. But if you go get high, don't come back. And it was powerful.
That must be the most difficult thing to actually commit to. Like, okay, this is the boundaries, this is the rules. I want to be back in the street, in the city, in a state that I don't even know anything about, or I'm gonna make it. Those were the two options given to you. Right. But I kind of feel like, while you were back in Alaska, but improving your self-image, improving your routine, taking care of yourself, like you were getting ready for what you needed to do to actually get sober. Right. And I am yet to hear about a recovery story that do not involve connection and being loved. And that's what I just heard right now. Like what really changed and helped you actually make it and maintain sobriety is that you had somebody to believe in you, to have empathy for you and be present, accept you exactly as you are and walk the path with you, not being alone feeling connection. For me, that was a physical sensation of warmth when I got connection back in my early recovery. And I felt so cold for years before. Always, always very, very cold inside. So that was really noticeable physically. And I'm not sure if that's something that you relate to what I just said, but like
Absolutely.
the fact that somebody believes in us is enough for us to envision that perhaps it might be true.
Right. It was definitely like powerful that I was like, okay. And like, he just let me know if I didn't want you here, it wouldn't be here. And like, don't let anybody in my house. But like, he had faith that I could do it. And he had seen me go through like, we've been friends since I was 10 years old. So he has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it in between. And for him to offer and actually walk the path with me, like it's been amazing. Like they say like your first relationship after your recovery, or after, you get sober, is like the hardest, or after you've been in toxic relationships and friendships for so many years, the next one is like the most difficult. And it's our relationship is the most difficult just because we work harder at it. And at like getting along rather than fighting or whatever, like, do you feel some type of way? Just like, it's a whole other level of communication that I never had.
Yeah. And that sounds about right to me too. I haven't been in a relationship, in my recovery, but with community, with people I've connected to, I changed mostly all my people, places, and things, as a lot of people do. I probably was entertaining the thought of doing my recovery on my own, but I found out very early on that I needed community. I needed people. I needed someone. Doing it alone is a lonely path, and to have people that see your improvement, that see your change, and voice it back to you when you don't see it, is so important. Because it's the things we miss along the way.
It is very important. And I'm just now, like, not just now, like, I've been involved in some of the recovery community stuff online, but like, I know because of being involved with that, like, if I'm struggling and I really need to go to a meeting, there's a 24-hour one online. And like, I have confidence in knowing that I could just hook up to a meeting any time of the day if I wanted to, if I need to. And I now, though, have like people that I can call on like at any time of the day. Like, I'm struggling, can you chat? And I never felt like I had people that I could call at any time of the day in the past, unless I had a pocket full of money and they had,
Yes. And I guess that's key, right? And it comes from us internally, because when we are in active addiction, we surround ourselves with people that either have the same habits or can support, but that we can abuse to keep fueling that addiction. But when we are in sobriety, at least for me, I even have a hard time connecting with anybody that's not in recovery or have been in recovery and is sober. Because I feel like it's so hard to explain the place I'm at. I don't want to explain to a normie that I'm meeting, like, where I'm at and why I'm there. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it's really complicated. And even if I explain, I don't feel understood. But in the community, our story is all different. But everything that someone tells about their own story is relatable in a way or another, because the disease have made us disconnected from our own emotions, from other people in the same way, and reconnecting with people that are also reconnecting for the first time in a long time themselves. I'm not really that much of a believer in higher power, but there's definitely something magical in there that I cannot necessarily explain rationally. Maybe it's called love.
Like what you said about like normies, I don't even want to explain it because it's too complicated. I just actually had an interaction with somebody from my past recently who I was trying to explain all this stuff to, and stopped myself. I said, I can see that this is like not a conversation that's going in a productive direction. And I'm just going to stop right where I'm at and stop wasting my breath.
You know what
And it was kind of
sorry.
hurtful to them, but you don't understand. And I can, like, I'm at a place where I don't have to feel like I'm not going to be in uncomfortable situations where I have to feel argumentative over my recovery. Like, it is what it is. I am happy that I'm where I'm at, but yeah, it doesn't make up for like my past, but I'm not that person anymore. And you don't know me in as this person anymore, and you still know me as the person you thought who I was in the past. And like, I really had to like assess whether I wanted this person in my future. And I don't and I don't feel bad about it anymore. Like, I was a people pleaser when I was your friend, and I'm not that person anymore. And I'm not going to just tolerate your bad behavior because you're my friend.
And that's the thing, right? When we start being assertive with the people that we people please before, they won't like us anyway in return.
Mm-hmm.
They want the same old addict, miserable person that they can feed from. So the new person that you're becoming, sadly, is not the person that they accept in their life anyway. And it's hurtful, but I'd like to say it's hurtful for them. It's hurtful for you as well, I'm certain, in many ways, because if I relate it back to my own experience, and that's people that I love and care for, that I will never have back in my life unless something very special happened to them. Because on my end, I will never be the person that I used to be, and they cannot meet me halfway. I can recognize that, as you said, there's no point at trying to make an argument or try to prove myself to people that are not interested into it.
Yeah, and you know what? I would kind of echo a bit of that as well. Even if I'm not talking about, even I'm not explaining my recovery, even just with people that I don't know, I find like there's a certain like you talked about self-reflection, Crystal. Because of our recovery, I think you take that time for the self-reflection and to see what happened and why you behaved in such a manner and what the environment was, and you learn to change these things. Like you said, I just won't be around people that don't make me feel good anymore. I have boundaries now, like you discussed. I have boundaries now that I set that I never set before, even before addiction. I was already a people pleasing person before addiction. So my boundaries were porous. So I would let negative and toxic people be around me and basically hear their bullshit and like go along because I've known this guy since high school, or whatever, right? Make excuses for why I'm in this situation, but I'm not enjoying myself. I don't do that anymore. What I hear from you is you've set the same boundaries. I think it's just part of our self-reflection.
And I never realized how much. I didn't know what a trauma bond was before I got sober. Really, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
So all of my friends are trauma bond. I have no real friends. I'm really alone. Very difficult realization, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still struggle with it. I have this idea in my head of what our friendship was at one time, and then I'm like, it's not that. It's like I had an idea of what it should have been, but it has never been that, and I'm not willing to live in the land of suck and make believe anymore.
Yeah, and we don't have a choice. We can't. I know for myself, I can't allow myself that kind of magical thinking anymore. That kind of irrational thinking.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, right? There's so many irrational beliefs that we carry as addict, and those irrational thoughts keep coming back to us as reflex, right? And reframing and actually making sense of things that do not make sense in our head is at least for me, it's a daily activity, and that's perhaps the place where I invest the most energy in my recovery, is not believing my own bullshit because I forget that it's not true. And I'm self-torturing for absolutely no reason But if I let those irrational thoughts make their way into my head, I know that I'm going back to the place that I would wish I never go back to.
I've been counting all my steps, on my nose just turned to yes. Silently I must confess my troubled history. This washed away all my sins, starting over once again. This is where it all begins, it's right in front of me. Down is not where I belong, this aching heart won't turn to stone. There's a fire inside these bones, it was meant to be. I see your world still full of light, how could I ever been so blind? I still haven't lost my fight that haunts me in my sleep. I feel like waking up, I've had this dream before. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I want an empty mind, walk down this lonely shore. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. Higher, go higher. Higher, higher. I know only time will tell if all the cards will treat me well. Cause this hand that I've been dealt keeps me wondering. So now here I turn the page, I've learned to silence all my rage. Tell me who can really say what will tomorrow bring? I feel like waking up, I've had this dream before. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I want an empty mind, walk down this lonely shore. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. Higher, go higher. I find you so far away. I find you after all. I find you so far away. I find you after all. I feel like waking so far. I've had this dream before. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I want an empty mind, walk down this lonely shore. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I feel like waking so far. I've had this dream before. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I want an empty mind, walk down this lonely shore. I take these footsteps, go higher, go higher. I feel like waking up, I've had this dream before. I take these footsteps, go higher, higher.
Crystal, you said you've been sharing your story more recently, and you find it's getting easier each time. Do you find it cathartic? Do you find it's another way? Well, for one thing, you're of service by sharing your story. I can tell you this. I've seen it. Because
Thank you.
me and Ev, we facilitate in our own alumni group, which is a support group for addicts. And sharing is really important. It's like a cathartic release of whatever is intrusive thoughts are in your head. So you're saying that each time you tell, oh, go ahead.
It's been really therapeutic. Yeah. Like, and just even more like I can relate to other survivors in different ways, like and when I have now more confidence in talking about really uncomfortable things. For example, like they talk about intimacy and like all of that after your traumatic injury and being 80% burned. Yeah, that's, it's something that comes to mind. And so now that I have experienced it a little bit, I have the words to be able to help other newer survivors. And so when we're in groups, I tell them, like, this is the place to ask uncomfortable questions, and don't feel judged. And like, if you don't want to ask it, type it to me and I'll ask it, or I'll just answer it in a way that you don't have to ask it and feel some type of way about asking it.
You mentioned support groups for burn survivals, but do you also attend meetings for sobriety itself?
I don't.
You don't?
Not
So
currently. I used to, but not currently, no.
Okay. And do you think it made a huge difference, or?
It did make a difference. When I don't do like the 12-step stuff because I feel like it was kind of cultish, and I don't know. That's another story for another day. But
Really?
I was really also, I was getting hit on a lot by like older like people who had been sober for longer, and like then I found out about the 13th step and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel. So I'm just not gonna interact. But I had my sponsor, who we were doing the steps daily and like reading to each other, and her and I, she's a burn survivor also, so we have a connection there. And I did some groups with her, and I just told her my feelings about it, and I said, I hope that we can still be friends even though I'm not doing this reading to you, but it's just not for me. And being able to come to that realization was growth on its own, because I felt like I was going to be judged because I'm taking a different path than all these people that, I just didn't feel it was for me. I'm not a hopeless, helpless person, and that's what those books say that you are. And I don't identify that way anymore, so I'm not going to speak that into my life every day on a regular basis.
That's awesome to
That's one of the
hear.
best thing I ever heard on this podcast, because that's the way that we feel. We really contrast ourselves with the 12-step community. That my sobriety is a question of empowerment. I am in control of the next best decision I take, and I cannot surrender that control to anybody or anything else. And that's a firm belief. And hearing that from you is really refreshing on this podcast.
Thank you.
But you do still do the support groups for your community of burn victims. Is that correct?
I do. So I volunteer in the burn community, and I had to get some training and like apply for some of these volunteer positions, and so they gave me some training for it. And they're on Monday nights every other week.
Nice. Yeah, and hearing you talk about it, but you talked about having to relearn how to shower and everything else. I can't imagine really every detail and every aspect of life that must be talked about in those support groups, because you're relearning everything, right? Like you described.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I guess your experience is welcome to the newcomer, I'm sure.
Recently we had an experience that I think really helped a newcomer that is still in the hospital, that their injury occurred similar to mine. And I was just like, I'm Crystal Ray, and I'm a flammable liquid burn survivor, and my injury happened 5 years ago, and I'm a trained peer supporter, and I'm here. And it was just for them to hear that, yep, I'm trained to do this, and mine was self-inflicted also. And so even though they were probably completely different in how they happened, they're similar, and I can relate. And if you need to chat, even one-on-one when we're not in a big group, let the moderator know, and I'll be available.
And I guess since you spent like 3 years really disconnected and alone, carrying this injury and your recovery on your own, the fact of making people aware that they're not alone and that you're there for them definitely must have a very significant meaning in your life and in progressing in your recovery as well.
Absolutely. I really try to remind people that it only takes about 8 minutes to change somebody's thought process, even when they're struggling. And if you have 8 minutes to just sit down and sit with somebody in the darkness, even if you don't have all the answers, you'd be amazed how much that helps.
8 minutes you're talking about. Is that from your training that you're talking about? That you've learned this? Or?
I read a lot of books, but like
Right.
Simon Sinek did some, he talked about it, about just how his friend was going through something and like they didn't reach out, and he did like a study about how it only takes like 8 minutes to change somebody's frame of mind. So if you have 8 minutes, get in the habit of just asking your friends, you got 8 minutes? I need to chat.
Wow.
It's a very important notion. So yeah, it's not long. 8 minutes saves life, and it's all you need.
Yeah, I'm going to use that in my support groups.
Good.
Cool.
We're gonna limit the shares to 8 minute long.
Oh, wow. So what is your next step? I mean, well, I'm curious. So are you working from home then? You have a regular job too, I assume?
So I don't have a regular job, and I probably will never have a regular job again. Skin grafts don't sweat, and so they don't stretch, and so I have had surgeries and stuff to improve my mobility, but like they can fix your skin so it holds all your fluids inside, but it won't ever work the same as it did. So I get hot in an air conditioned building, and really I have to like limit my time outside to like 20 minutes and like pay attention to how hot I'm getting. And it's, that's part of why I will be disabled. But I do work from home. I have created a digital media company to share my story, and I'm working on self-publishing my memoir. It's called The Burn, the Broken, and the Beautiful, a memoir of me.
Is that the name of your digital media? Is that the name of your
my digital media company is CRH Media.
CRH Media?
CRH Media.
Cool. Just want to make sure people hear it.
Yeah, so
and we'll put all the links also in the episode description so that people can connect with you and support your journey.
So I have, it's Linktree/CRH Media to follow all my social media channels. And I have a YouTube channel. I share on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook.
Can't wait to read that book, honestly.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that it might not be a bestseller, but it will be one of the best stories because recovery is beautiful.
I'm working hard to make it be a bestseller, right? Pretty quickly. It's I have lots of help.
So you have the entrepreneur mindset, and that's all you need to succeed. Just like it's all you need to be sober. Believe in yourself, right?
Believe in yourself. That's right.
Absolutely.
Anything is possible if you just have a little belief in yourself.
Yeah, that's something people need to do.
Yeah, believe in themselves. Well, yes, and it's the most difficult part, I believe, in some ways, because you may have the sobriety mindset, but self-esteem is hard. Always also in fight with shame and guilt. I'm still struggling with that, and it hinders my ability to develop self-confidence and sentiment of self-worth. So I guess that's why I consider myself still in early recovery, because for as long as I don't passionately love myself, life's still a struggle.
Right. And I still struggle with those things too. I still struggle with those too. Like guilt and shame. Like mom guilt is real. I have 2 adult children, and like that's probably the biggest thing I hold guilt of. All of the moments that I missed while I was screwing off. It's getting better as my relationships are improving, and it's all that. I'm really grateful for the relationships I have with my children.
Well, you deserve them, and I'm certain they're proud of you as well with the journey you had in the last 2 years. And it's only the beginning, right? My children are young, and I'm currently not able to see them as much as I would like to. And it's hard because they've been with me 24/7 until I decided to get clean. So they got the worst of me, and now they cannot get the best of me. That definitely is difficult. But when I see, right, your story gives me hope, because once we are patient enough, things get back to us and relationship get back to us. Um, yeah. You want to talk more about your
They have just been always the fuel that has drove me, and they came to see me in the hospital, sent me a picture of us it was framed, and I hung it at the end of my bed, and they just have always been my biggest cheerleaders, and they really think that I'm invincible now. And my youngest son, I recently hired as my virtual assistant for my business, and just to be able to work with him and like be able to be on the same page, and like I can't even explain it, but it's awesome.
and very meaningful, definitely.
And just to have that trust with each other again. The trust with each other is big, and the older one hasn't quite come around as much as the younger one, but he will.
Yeah, in due time, definitely. That's a very, very touching story.
Thank you.
And as Eric was saying, well, this is your next step, like your business move. But how do you see your recovery evolving, like on a more personal level?
Are you asking or saying?
Yeah. I'm asking, like, what do you envision being the future for you in sobriety?
I hope that I can get more involved in just helping other addicts, but I still, like I said, I'm still pretty new in my own recovery, and I definitely had to change all the people and places and everything about my life, and I'm actually going on a trip to one of the places that I used with the height of my addiction, with my children and next month. And so it's like a whole nother level of accepting it and going and like working through this is my old stomping ground, but I'm going to have a different experience sober there. And that's just, I have a lot of goals coming. I'm writing my book, and I plan to have a TED Talk about mental health crisis and visible difference. And there's lots of things that I haven't really touched on in this interview, but this week is also British Beauty Week, and I am a volunteer and advocate in the visible difference community, and there is a UK-based nonprofit organization, and their name is Face Equality International, and they help raise awareness for people who live with visible difference, so scars, birthmarks, cleft lips, and they are highlighting me they let me know that they're going to highlight one of the quotes that I sent them over the weekend for British Beauty Week. There's lots of stuff in store.
That's amazing.
Pretty excited.
And I guess that also validates, like, as you said, the purpose of sharing a story. And something big like that, international coverage of your journey. I guess it kind of says that you are doing the right thing, quite obviously.
Right.
I will share that I think everybody's recovery story, no matter where you are and how long you've been in recovery, is valid, and you need to share it as much as you feel comfortable doing. It will help someone, and I wanted to come back to one thing. You say you were going to do a TED Talk on mental health. Ev and I have talked about mental health a little bit on our podcast because I deal with a lot of intrusive thoughts and problems with low self-esteem and clarity sometimes. And Ev also has issues. I'll let him speak for himself. And so we've kind of made it a reoccurring theme where we talk about mental health because it feels like it's interlinked with our past and our addiction. So how do you reconcile that or relate that? What is your interpretation of it?
I definitely feel like if my mental health is not intact, I will be on the quick road to not being recovered. And so they do go hand in hand, and you have to treat the mental health before you can treat the addiction. And sometimes that's hard because lots of things.
Well, just the system in itself, the addictions, like a lot of rehab centers that just get you in, do your 30 days. Here's the program. Now get out, and there's no follow up, and there's no dealing with the mental health. There's no therapy. There's no psychologist or whatever. It's just here's the program. This is now go do it. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to blame people that receive that 30-day treatment that they themselves believe that they're cured because, well, if I wouldn't be cured, I would still be receiving care. But it doesn't work that way. The resources are minimal, and then the rest you got to do it on your own. Yeah, Eric was saying, like, I personally battle depression, anxiety, PTSD currently. So yeah, mental health is often left out, even of the, I would say, sobriety community that sometimes remain taboo, right? As comorbidity, like, okay, I don't use, then life is beautiful.
Mhm.
There's a lot of comorbidities and coexisting challenges. I guess your story is more speaking in that sense because it's visible, as you said it yourself. But mental health definitely usually is left out of the equation.
Right.
And I want to say, like, as addicts, if we don't address it, we're not really progressing. At some point, we're going to plateau, and we're just abstinent, but still having a lot of problem to overcome.
Right.
Now, I'll be anxious to hear your TED Talk on that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have like, that's just a goal I've put out into the universe. We're not they're not talking to me yet about it, but I could see myself talking about like visible difference on a stage, like, cause it's like when you see me in person, like there's not a part of my body that you could see that doesn't have a scar. And, so I'm using it to the best of my ability, like marketing it for like what it is. Like, okay, well, you can't deny that I've been through some shit, and let's talk about it.
Right. Yeah, you can't escape it, so you have to deal with it.
And it faces me in the mirror every morning, and that was for a long time like the hardest thing for me to do. I would cover up the mirrors and but my trauma faces me in the mirror every morning, and I could choose to have a hateful reaction to the appearance in the mirror or love it, and I chose to love it and keep nurturing it, and it's gotten better over the last couple of years.
Well, as peer support,
I gotta say, from my point of view,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was saying, from my point of view, you're very beautiful, and to see your face light up like this, like the expression of joy on your face is very beautiful to watch.
Thank you.
As you were saying, Eric?
I was going to say, so I guess in your as a peer support person, you must broach the subject of acceptance and self-love, obviously, quite often. I guess that is like you discussed, very important in both senses of your recovery, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we touch on it a lot, and we talk to newer burn survivors to, talk to them about having a rehearsed response and letting people know that even though you have these scars, that most people, there's going to be curious people, but you don't owe them an explanation even if they're asking, and just to coach them on being able to say, that's all I'd like to talk about. Like, that's all I feel comfortable sharing. Or even like people will come up to me in the store, like, just like, what happened to your face? Like, I was in a bad fire. Or, what's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. What's wrong with you?
But you got to be prepared to face this, and you got to have the right tools, set the right boundaries, I want to say, because otherwise it will keep you down all the time if you're not comfortable saying, well, that's all you're going to get out of me, and deal with it.
Right. And even some people unfortunately get a kick out of making people uncomfortable in public.
Well, yeah, bullies.
And like, I don't really allow that now. At first I would just be shocking, and that was like my defense mechanism. I would just tell people, I tried to kill myself. You want to know more? And they'd be like, oh shit. But I am a little, if people ask me in the store now, I tell them I was in a bad fire, and usually they'll say a car fire, a house fire, and I'll say, does it matter?
But they're trying to relate it to themselves, like, what should I be worried about? Was it a car fire? What kind of car? It's like,
fire is fire.
Yeah. You understand how people actually automatically, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of people automatically start to think about themselves, right? Like, it was a car fire, or a house fire, what started it, and it's very odd.
I guess their own discomfort brings those awkward questions to entertain a discussion that they're not comfortable having to begin with.
Right.
Well, those that have empathy, at least.
That's exactly right. Or they just assume that I, like, some people come right up to me and they said, oh, girl, they should have helped you more. I had some of the best doctors in the country, thank you, and I look pretty damn good.
Yes.
Yeah, you said you were in Seattle?
Yes, at Harborview Medical Center and the University of Washington.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out there.
And I guess that was a quick call, right? From Alaska, where they're going to fly you and where you're going to get the best care was a decision that was taken in a matter of minutes, probably.
Right. So they helicoptered me from where I was to Anchorage, stabilized me in Anchorage, and put me on a jet to Seattle. So I'm not sure how long I was actually there, but I think less than an hour I was in Anchorage, and then 5.5 months in Seattle, and 5 months at home. And then I went back to Alaska and spent the next 2.5 years there struggling.
You mentioned your trip with your son that is coming up. Is it to visit Alaska?
No. So we lived in Spokane for a while. And we're going to go to Spokane. I'm going to be on a TV show, and my son's my VA now, so he's going to come with me.
Wow, that's a really beautiful trip ahead of you.
Yeah, and my older son lives in Spokane, so he has not seen me sober. He's not seen me sober, like, since I got sober. Since my burn, he has not seen me, so we just actually bought the tickets yesterday.
Well, I'm happy for you. It's going to be a pretty emotional moment, that's for sure. On what TV channel can we see you and when?
So I'm going to be on Create Your Victorious Life with Cindy Gould, and it's on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251 on Roku, I think. It's called Create Your Victorious Life with Cindy Gould.
Yeah, I have Zingo. Yeah.
I'm going to make sure to not miss that. That's definitely on my
I
list.
post links to in my link tree. I post my past interviews also. So you could see all my past interviews in my link tree also.
I'm going to make sure to promote that as much as we can with the use of that podcast. Hey, Crystal, it's getting a bit late, but is there something in particular we haven't touched on that you'd like to discuss before we go to the end segment of the episode?
Well, I often share my LMFAO mantra. We all know what LMFAO stands for, and my LMFAO really helps me to giggle a little sometimes, but my LMFAO stands for, the L is to love yourself. And I love myself in the mirror when I get up in the morning, and I look myself in the mirror. And this is hard for some people to do. Look yourself in the eyes. Say, I love you. I say, I love you, Crystal. And it costs a lot of money to look this good. So let's go show them how we do it. And the The A or the LMFAO. The M is the make your bed. So for the first part of my recovery, I had a really hard, I struggled with it all. So the bare minimum was I could get out of bed, count it as physical therapy, make the bed, and it helped set me up for a good night's sleep right away in the first thing in the morning. First completed task of the day. I can count it as physical therapy, and it sets me up for a good night's sleep, even if I had a wreck day. So the M, and then the F is faith. Have faith that the universe is working in my favor and not against me. It's happening for me and not to me. And the A is to acknowledge your accomplishments. Acknowledge those small wins throughout the day. Acknowledge that you loved on yourself, that you made your bed, and that you meditated and had some time with yourself, with your higher power, whatever that means for you. God, source, universe, whatever. And acknowledge your accomplishments. And the last one is oxygen. Breathe. Sometimes when like you've done all the other things, like sometimes you got to take a few moments to take a moment to breathe, and a deep breath, a few of them. And when the day of my fire, I didn't take a moment to breathe, and so that's really important to me, and I like to share that.
Awesome. And we just did small victories in a group, eh?
Yes, but I think LMFAO in itself is a great topic for a group.
That's right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Really love that.
We'll use it in our support
because
group.
those are all things I struggle with.
Don't worry, we're
It's not a
gonna credit you with it.
Oh, definitely. But listening to you, like those are things that I struggle with. Like telling myself I love myself in the mirror, very, very, very difficult. I never make my bed. I often do, but it's because I'm gonna have some visitors. I don't make it for myself, I'm faithful though I have faith in my future. Probably not as strong as it should be, but there's a lot of value in repeating ourselves those 5 simple things, right? A lot of reflection ahead for me. Thanks for sharing.
You're very welcome, and I hope your group gets some benefit out of it too. And for a long time, I carried that around on a 3x5 card in my pocket, and it just said LMFAO and love yourself, make your bed, have faith, acknowledge your accomplishments, and oxygen, breathe.
What do you think, Ev? It's running kind of late. I work tomorrow.
Yes. Well, I'm just a lack of words. I'm really touched by this interview.
We covered a lot, and we'll have you back on, Crystal, if you would like. Especially after you've gone through this trip to Spokane, if you feel like you want to, if it works out and you get like
absolutely
what you're looking for out of this, I want you to come back. Feel free to come back and tell our listeners.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you having me.
I know I just enjoyed it immensely, and I learned a lot, and I just want to tell you that you're a great source of inspiration.
Thank you. Same.
I feel privileged actually to have had this discussion with you. And as Eric was saying, like, whenever you feel like you have something to do, well, you have an outlet here, VIP card, any moment.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. I might have you guys teach me how to do a meme.
We can do an LMFAO meme if you want.
Yeah.
I am just as technical. I don't like the tech, just like Chantel. And I did want to touch on, we have to just say, you are loved. Thank you, Chuck, for putting us all into proximity with each other to actually make this happen. Last week we had to reschedule because we lost Chuck, and I appreciate that you guys allowing me to reschedule. I was pretty emotional over it, but it was helpful to see his tribute.
Yeah. And for those that are listening and not familiar with Chuck was the host on the podcast Ashes to Awesome, and great inspiration for us. That probably is the mentor of our own adventure with podcasting and even memes. It's been a great inspiration. And as you said, Crystal has connected so many people around the world in that virtual recovery community. Definitely, we've learned about you on this podcast. Yes,
Still touching
was
lives
taken.
from heaven.
Well, yes, and I guess that's only fair for us to keep carrying his message. He passed unexpectedly just a few days before he was 2 years sober. Yeah, and his message for those that don't know is that his mother, when he was in the depth of his addiction, but all the time in his life, would always end every discussion with all of her child with "You are loved," no matter what. And it has been such a powerful message over the last 2 years because that's very true. When you are at the bottom, rock bottom of your addiction, you don't feel love. You are loved, but you don't feel it. So being reminded that you are loved sparks that little bit of hope that helps you get back on track and reach for sobriety. And for that in itself, I'm eternally grateful for Chuck's presence in our life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said. I'm not going. That's enough.
It was hard to get out, by the way. So
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Well, like we said, and you want to come back, Crystal, and thanks for bringing that up. We hadn't acknowledged it yet, and it's important that people check out his podcasts. They still are there. There's over 200 and something of them last I looked, and the man's
Yeah.
message, the man's voice, the man's ideas are still there, and they should be listened to.
It's super awesome that we can listen to it.
and for your memes and other technical issues related requests, I'm going to connect with you from my personal profile. So I got you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for having me and have a wonderful evening.
You too.
You too. Keep coming back.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.